Alright, this is 5.1 Probability Distributions. So we've already done a lot of these pieces, so really this is just a vocabulary game. So in order to have a probability distribution, the first thing we need to do is actually define our random variable x. Now you notice I'm using a boldface x here, and that's because it represents all of the outcomes. It is 0 head, 1 head, 2 head, or 3 head. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So, for my example, find/create the probability distribution for the number of heads when flipping a coin 3 times. Notice here I'm not just saying the outcome. I'm very specifically saying let's physically count the number of heads. So my outcome is 1 head, 2 head, 3 heads, and don't forget the ever important 0 heads. So I could, if I wanted to, create a sample space to look at all the outcomes. I also could, if I chose to, make an L1 and an L2 where I have the number of heads and the frequency. But when I'm doing a probability distribution, that's this information down here, which consists of the outcomes, 0 head, 1 head, 2 head, 3 heads, matched up to the relative frequency of each of those events. In other words, the probability of each of those events. So probability of the random variable x. So that's 1/8, 3/8, 3/8, and 1/8 respectively to 0 head, 1 head, 2 heads, or 3 heads. Alright, recapping. To be a probability distribution, you have to have two things. You have to very clearly have a random variable and list out the outcomes for that random variable. So 0 head, 1 head, 2 head, or 3 heads are the outcomes, but along with those outcomes I have to have paired the probability of each outcome. In other words, the relative frequency. And I get this information the same way I did for the earlier chapters, where I make an L2, a frequency list, and then I divide L2 by the total and create a relative frequency, which is the probability. Now, there's two things to watch out for when doing probability distributions, and they are their probabilities. So we already know this. The sum of all of the probabilities has to equal 1. If you add up everything, it's equal to 1. End of story. Also, each individual probability must live in between 0 and 1. Now, when we did the earlier stuff in chapter 4, they had two other things, that things could be 0 or things could be 1. Now we're just focusing on the meat of it, these two rules. You add up all the probabilities, it's 1. All the individual probabilities live between 0 and 1. And with that, you should be able to do everything in 5.1.